How to sell at a networking event. So in my previous video, I talked about sales lessons from networking and the two most important questions you should ask at a networking event. This is particularly important for those who are introvert or shy or don't particularly like networking events. That is not what do you do, because people can get defensive, they feel they're being judged. It's what brought you here today and who can I introduce you to? Two vital questions. And I went to a networking event last Thursday. I'll include some pictures here as well. It was a fantastic experience. And I sold at the networking event. And I wanted to talk about a way of selling, which is quite unique and which really can work wonders at networking events. It works better at conferences and stages. It works better at paid conferences. It works better at paid networking events rather than free ones. But this one worked, which is why I want to share it. Anytime anything works, I will share it. Anytime something doesn't work, I will share it as well. So I spoke at a networking event. I was giving a 10-minute talk. And it was only 10 minutes, and it took me about 2 hours to prepare for it, which is a long time for a 10-minute talk. It's actually easier for me to give a 45-minute or a 1-hour talk than it is to give a 10-minute one. 10-minute talks are really difficult to give. And I was talking about sales. And I didn't want to just do the usual, here's my sales predictions for 2025. I wanted to do something better than that. So I told a story. Because people will remember stories much, much more than they ever will anything else. You can tell all the tips, all the stats, everything you want, but storytelling is more and more effective. And what I did was I started talking about my childhood. So you start off the thing going, once upon a time. That takes people back in time. And I talked about my childhood. And I said, what did you want to be when you grew up? When I went to school, people wanted to be teachers. They wanted to be engineers, apprentices, plumbers, working in the building trade. Some wanted to be accountants. We all had different dreams. And I'm Indian, so I had two choices, become a doctor or become a failure. Those are your two choices when you're Indian. And that got a nice laugh in the first 30 seconds, which is very important. So I got the audience interacting when I asked, what did you want to be when you were young? And second of all, I got laughter, which is just, again, it breaks a typical talk of a networking event. And most speeches at networking events are not very exciting. And I told my story about how I wanted to be a rock star when I was a kid and how I failed horribly. Now, the most important thing was, here are the lessons learned from failing at the age of 19 when I tried to be a rock star. And people remember that afterwards. And what do? They went to social media and they talked about it. They talked about how powerful the talk was. They talked about how useful it was. They talked about what they learned in sales and how easy it was, rather than me just saying, here's 5 tips in the space of 30 seconds. I actually told a 10-minute story that got people engaged emotionally and got them thinking and gave value. And one member of that audience was head of sales at a company I wanted to work with for quite some time, but I wasn't really getting anywhere with. And having given that talk, he then spoke internally. He's head of sales. He spoke internally to the commercial director and the financial director. They then spoke to the CEO. The CEO then signed off the sales training. And I'm doing a half day of sales training in January with this company based on a 10-minute talk I gave. That is the power of being able to speak at events. It's the power of being able to stand anywhere and give a talk for 60 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Most people can't do it. Most people will talk about themselves, which is very different from telling a story. So if you get a chance at any networking event to tell a story, or you get a stage for 10 minutes, or even 5 minutes, or even 2 minutes, tell a story. It is one of the best ways to sell without being salesy, and it is one of the best ways to connect with people. Now, if someone's never met you, they're not going to hear a 2-minute speech and suddenly hire you in the dot. But what you will do is you'll get that interest, and that interest is the first stage of a sales process. It's quite rare anybody contacts you and says, I must hire you right now. You get the first point of interest, second point of interest, a third point of interest, a fourth point of interest, and it builds and builds until trust is developed, and then you get a deal. And there's so many things, of course, that can happen along that way that can break that. They might get a better choice elsewhere. They might get a cheaper budget elsewhere. The boss might say, hey, work with this person instead. Sometimes more interesting things may come along. Sometimes more urgent things might come along. There's so many reasons why deals fail. Sometimes it's your own fault as well. But being able to take that stage for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or 10 minutes at a networking event and telling stories that people can connect with emotionally is way more effective than just saying, Here's 5 tips to keep in mind for next year at a networking event. Hope this is useful. I hope that when you start your networking again next year, this is really going to help you on so many levels. Most people go to networking events, don't really get much out of it. A lot of people go to networking events and they don't go again because they're not quite sure how to use networking. So have a look at the video. I think it's called Sales Lessons on Networking. You'll learn so much about the questions and how to work a networking event. And then this one here specifically about speaking at networking events and generating those extra leads.